Do you support the return of elected school board for the governance of St. Louis public schools? And what specific changes will you advocate for to improve public schools?
I think we ought to be electing our own representatives to run the school system. As far as the specific change that I would want them to incorporate, it would be the bill that I passed when I was a member of the legislature, which was the St. Louis City Student Bill of Rights. And that would reestablish a K through 8 grade school system with the right to go to grade schools in your own neighborhood. And with the freedom of people to transfer in to fill vacancies. That would be the major reform, because I think what's harmed St. Louis City over the years is the lack of neighborhood schools, which we had because of the DSEG case. But now that the DSEG case is over, and we don't have discrimination within the system, which is cognizable according to law's discrimination, I think we ought to go back to the old system we had. At one time when we had Dr. Kottmeyer as the superintendent and some really top people running the school system, we had a primo system, and I think we can go back to that.
Okay. What, if any, reforms will you advocate for St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department?
Well, I think the most important thing you have to look at for the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department is the quality of the officers coming in. You want high reading score standards and literacy ability, because they can't be good witnesses and they can't do reports without that. And that is sort of a basic sort of qualification for anybody whom you want to interact with and treat people the way they need to be treated. Sort of the standard for a police ought to be like the English Bobby. You want the guy who is always going to be polite, but then ready to do what he has to do if the citizen isn't acting accordingly.
So do you support waiving the residency requirements for new police recruits?
No. I think that it's a mistake not to have the police living in St. Louis City. And I think that it was a mistake for us to go away from having a state-run department and having a city-run department. But that happened as a result of Rex Singfeld money, and we don't have really a way of putting it back together. And the dilemma with the system we have now is that whenever there's police misconduct and the police and the department are being sued, that's something that's picked up by the taxpayers of the city of St. Louis. Under the old system, the Attorney General came in and defended, and the state of Missouri was the one that paid the bill for the wrongdoing.
So we also, like I said, have some candidate-specific questions, which we'll get into here, a couple of them. You were recalled as alderman of the 24th Ward once before. Why are you running again, and why should voters trust you and send you back into office?
Well, first of all, I was recalled based on lies, and we should never have a political system where the outcome in an election is based on lies. If you want to go that route, then you go the route of Trump, and I don't think anybody wants that. As far as why people should want me back, I probably have a better record having served. People could know that what they're going to get in advance. They'll get more of what they had before. And what occurred in my previous tenure as alderman, when they had the statistics on April 5 of '05 regarding the 10 neighborhoods that had the highest increase in property values, neighborhoods that had been represented by myself, there were 6 of them out of the 10 that had the highest increase in property values. And that's because we had good government. And what people don't realize is that an alderman, although he has legislative functions that are very important, he's essentially a city manager. And that's something I knew how to do, and I'd like to do it again.
So you said that you were recalled on lies, which kind of goes into my next question. Can you speak to the relationship and history with the other candidates, including the reasons and outcomes of lawsuits? And what would you do to bridge that divide, if elected, to work with Lori and Terry and the people of the 24th Ward?
Well, I didn't have any conflict with Terry.
With Terry, okay.
Terry was an individual citizen who was doing her thing, which everybody has a right to do. And I really don't know what she might have done in those election cycles. But as regards Terry, she has said that I sued her for opposing my candidacy or for supporting my recall. That's absolutely untrue.
Is that with Terry or with Lori?
With Lori,
okay.
I'm sorry. And that's absolutely untrue. That was a libel action. And whenever you have a libel action by a public figure, there's what they call a SLAPP statute. If it was a frivolous lawsuit, they would have had it thrown out with the SLAPP statute. It was ruled against at the court level. It went up to the Court of Appeals, and it was upheld with the Court of Appeals. At the end of the day, I dismissed out all of the individuals. It was really a suit against 7-Eleven, and I even dismissed out the proprietor of 7-Eleven. Those individuals weren't hurt in any way. I think that she's happy. She's become a celebrity as a result of that. And when we were talking about dismissing her out, she said she wanted to stay in the suit and fight me. So that's what was going on there. And when you think of it in a larger context, wouldn't it have been better if President Obama had sued Donald Trump over the birther issue? Because what they were saying there was that Obama didn't have the right to serve. He was serving illegally. If Obama had used the libel laws that we have in this country, he could have stopped Trump initially, and we wouldn't have the sort of problems we've got now.
Right. Let me get back to my questions here. This is the question that was submitted 6 times.
All right, good.
Okay.
This is an important one.
This is an important one. What is your stance on abortion?
My stance on abortion is that it's not something that comes before the Board of Aldermen. The only time I've ever had an opportunity to vote on that issue was when I was in the legislature. And the vote I took there was to protect the right of a woman to protect her own health. The very right-wing position was that they didn't even want a woman to be able to protect her own health. I voted for that. So that is one that goes towards pro-choice. The bill that involved, though, was the partial birth abortion bill. So they wanted to have the hardest bill they could possibly have. I voted in favor of the bill in chief, but I voted for the amendment to the bill that protected the rights of women.
So let me make sure I understand. So you voted for the bill that was against partial birth, or is that reverse?
No, I voted for the amendment to the bill that would protect the mother's right to protect her own health.
So the follow-up to that is, how would you protect those seeking an abortion as aldermen? And this kind of goes to the buffer zone that the aldermen had before them before.
There's a balance there between the rights of free speech, which the protesters have, who are anti-abortion, and the rights of the women to health care. I would come down somewhere in the middle to protect the rights of the protesters, but I think they need to be back far enough so that they're not interfering with the women who are going into the clinics.
So it sounds like a buffer, kind of like the buffer zone that...
I think a buffer zone, a reasonable distance. I mean, these women are involved in something which is sort of a traumatic situation in their lives, and I don't think that it's proper to attack them at that time.
Okay. During the debate, you advocated for a policing model that during our debate, you advocated for a policing model that was basically described broken windows. So the model that was used in New York, a strategy that failed in New York, leading to many low-level offenders incarcerated, but no reduction in violent crime or property or people. Can you elaborate on your recommendations for public safety?
Well, perhaps I wasn't articulate enough at the principal meeting that we had at Pat's. I wasn't talking about incarcerating people for small offenses. I was talking about a general appearance of orderliness and maintenance of property, enforcement of building codes, and the general sort of upgrading, not upgrading, but encouragement of new people who've got higher standards to move into the area. Because it's really the standards within the community that go a long way to reducing the crime in the neighborhood. So I wasn't talking about wanting to incarcerate people for small offenses and using that. Although when I was in the legislature, I took a very hard stand against Governor Carnahan when they wanted to put in new prisons. I didn't think that was the way to go. I thought we should be reducing the population of the prisons, both because I've always been on the defense side as an attorney, so I've got a certain sympathy for people that are involved in the system, and but the expense is enormous to house people. It's much more cost effective to do intervention. I just heard something the other day about a client, and he had various addiction problems, and it took him 9 months to get into a program. And when he was in the program, he met a girl who was also an addict, and she got him into some new unfortunate habits, and he overdosed last week. So I understand these things, and you know, I visited the prisons to see my clients. I don't like guys going there, but I know it's necessary. But the sentences don't need to be as long as they are in order to be a deterrent. And what happens mainly is that the guys who can't comport themselves properly end up as parole violations, and they go right back. So we need to have systems in place that help people get work and observe normative standards so they don't have those problems.
Okay. So there was a question regarding your previous tenure in public service for the city, and that if you are elected, you basically only have to serve 1 more year before you get a pension. And if that is that why you're running?
That's absolutely untrue.
Okay.
My pension vested after 5 years. I've got a pension of $302 per month. That's the great pension that they're talking about. And I don't know what happens if I go back, whether the new time goes on the pension or how that works. I'd have to talk to the pension board.
Okay.
I know where that question came from, but it's spurious and ridiculous.
Okay.
And I hope they don't think that a lawyer needs to go in and increase the pension another $50.
I guess it always depends on how good the lawyer is, right?
I'm doing fine.
Okay. As not a lawyer, then I really don't have a perception of what that would be. But okay, so there was feedback from the Young Dems event that happened the night before, that none of the candidates, none of them, really answered this question well. And so we wanted to ask it again because it was asked several times. So there were some, that's not really a great answer to, some problematic answers. So as far as feedback goes. So what is your plan to improve race relations in St. Louis?
Well, the place where you do race relations, if you're an alderman, is the way you enact with your colleagues on the board, number one. And when I was on the board last time, I had no problem interacting with and doing things that are good for all of St. Louis with the African American members of the board. I think at the time we were about half and half. We may not be quite half and half now. So that's the beginning. And another thing you can do if you're an alderman, you get invited by your colleagues to go to affairs in their ward. And anytime I'm invited to go anywhere, I'm going to go and reach out to people and try to understand problems. That's the best you can do as alderman.
Okay. All right. Do you believe our ward, the 24th ward, is becoming gentrified? And if so, how does gentrification affect the character, safety, and financial benefits and losses of local businesses and the neighborhood?
I've been out campaigning, and I don't see that the ward is really becoming over-gentrified. I'm finding that a lot of the homes are probably rental, and they haven't been maintained or fixed up enough. So I don't see gentrification as being a big problem. I do find, though, when I'm talking to people and I'm out there, I always ask them what they do for a living. So I'm finding a lot of people that have sort of upscale jobs, and that's very good because they've got a lot to contribute to the neighborhoods, to organizations and the church groups and everything else. But I don't see gentrification as being a big problem. In fact, I see upscaling as being a big benefit to existing residents because it makes the neighborhood safer, and it also increases the value of property. So if you're an older person and at some point you're going to need to go into some sort of an assisted care facility, you'll have more equity in your home. So I think it's a win-win. It's good we get new people, and it's good for the existing residents that new people are coming in.
Okay. So do you think that it affects the character, the safety, financial, do you think it impacts the financial losses or benefits to local businesses?
Well, it should help local businesses because some of the new people have more disposable income. If you don't have much disposable income, you're going to figure out how to watch movies for free. You're not going to have cable TV, and you won't even have a landline. You're happy to pay your Ameren and your Spire and your mortgage, and hopefully you don't have a big car expense.
Kind of on a related note, what are your plans to increase development in the business districts within the ward?
The best way to, well, it depends what you call the business districts. If you look at the St. Louis marketplace, my first plan for the marketplace would be to get some code compliance on those rusty light standards down there. Each one of those is a separate violation, and the owners of the marketplace are from out of town, and I think we need to bring them into compliance, at least get the aesthetics of the marketplace up to middle class standards. And that's going to go a long way in improving business climate. And then if we start doing things like taking care of that building immediately to the east of Hampton on Manchester, where the bricks are falling down, then that's going to improve the general appearance. And I've got some other ideas for Manchester, but you know, when you do about 5 or 6 things, then the combination of those things is going to make it a more desirable area for new business. And we're perfectly positioned between the Grove to the east and Maplewood to the west, so that getting the business district there going back again it's really a no-brainer. It should have happened 5 years ago.
Okay. Your close relationship with a well-known white supremacist is public knowledge. In larger landscape of hate crimes and that rise nationally, what do you publicly renounce white supremacy and white supremacists and look to dismantle systematic racism in St. Louis public policy and institutions?
Well, first of all, I don't have any relationship with a white supremacist. A gentleman came to me in April of '05. He had an accident in Forest Park where he was struck riding his bicycle. He was being sued for his medical bill. I defended him on the medical bill. On June 8th of that same year, the article came out in the paper which exposed him as a racist, someone who was anti-Semitic. At that point, I didn't go forward and take the piece of the case where I could have made money. I dropped him as a client. I'm probably the only person in that room that has ever been in an anti-Nazi rally. And there was the only one I ever know of was one where we marched against the German Cultural Institute down on Jefferson at the time. I studied Jewish thought under Rabbi Reuben. He was a close personal friend of mine. When I was a kid, I was approached by the rabbi at the A&P store. He thought I was Jewish because of my funny glasses. You know, we were all hippies in those days. When he found out I wasn't Jewish, he employed me as his driver. So I was the rabbi's driver on Saturday. So anybody who thinks I'm anti-Semitic is just trying to come up with something that is damaging to my reputation. It's absolutely untrue. Now, this individual that they've talked about wandered around in the community and said he was a supporter of mine. I can't prevent anybody from saying something, saying they're a supporter of mine.
Okay.
On the alt-right thing, please, that's absurd, because when I was in the legislature, the best way to figure out what somebody's political theory is to look at their voting record. And when they rated my voting record, I was like 5th or something. I was right at that very top tier of progressive voters. There were only like 5 or 6 people that had on the Democratic side that had a better progressive voting record than I did.
Okay. We're actually to our last question.
Oh, is that fast?
Pretty fast, yeah.
All right, good.
Okay, so if you're elected and are able to accomplish your goals while in office, how will our ward and city be different in 10 years? So this isn't necessarily saying that you are planning on staying for 10 years. It's how, if you can accomplish those goals that you have in mind, what will our ward and our city, how will it be different? So if you could list specific examples, that would be helpful.
Well, I think if I'm elected, I'm going to do everything I can to try to get St. James the Greater School converted and used as a charter school. So we have the same thing on this side of Manchester that they have over at Epiphany, at Smiley and Ivanhoe. So what we need is a charter K through 8 grade school with the area that they serve being between Highway 44 to the south, Highway 64 to the north, city limits to the west, and Kings Highway to the east. That's a large enough catchment district for us to fill up a grade school. If we had our own neighborhood grade school, then I think we could have a burgeoning neighborhood and we'd be able to keep people. And especially if we got the same operator that they have over at Gateway Science at Epiphany, then they'd have a path to a very good high school also. So I think the first thing we need to do is get a real neighborhood school in our area and have a catchment district that I've just described. And the catchment district concept has already passed court muster because it was challenged when they did it over there for zip code 39 and 09. And so that would be my first goal, is to get a charter school in Dogtown. My next goal would be to try to get on board and do some of the things that the Carpenters Union is concerned with, and that's making sure that on any projects that are built that have any kind of public incentive or ones without public incentive, that all those builders are complying with their laws and that the workers are paying their city earnings tax. We've got a big crisis in underpayment in personal property tax because people buy cars on the east side because they don't want to pay sales tax, and they bring them over here and they don't register them. And we're probably losing a lot of personal property tax. We're probably losing a lot of city earnings tax. So we need to figure out how to tighten up the system so that there are some points where the builders have to show compliance at various times when they do various inspections, or they won't get their inspection certificate. And on the personal property tax on the autos, I think we're going to have start doing enforcement and have the police department take seriously looking at the Illinois plates on cars and then running records to find out if those people live here, because we might be catching personal property tax and city earnings tax. So what we have to worry about generally is increasing the tax base through the taxes we already have, so we get greater compliance. Because without an adequate tax base, we can't do all the things we need to do to make St. Louis City a vibrant place for everybody. So my goal would be to increase the tax base so that we can do the good things, have a neighborhood school that would serve everybody within that designated area, which would make us a vibrant area that people could move into and stay and not think, okay, now the kids are out of 5th grade or out of grade school, now we've got to go someplace else. We need local things because that's the way you build community. We want people to be able to say, okay, 50 years from now, I moved into Dogtown, I had this nice new house I bought, and now my grandchildren are coming for Thanksgiving dinner. That's my dream for Dogtown, and that's sort of my idea for St. Louis City too.
Great.